talked about these early points in your careers where you started to work with Dan's EI concept. I'm curious to hear from you what you have seen in some of these other organizations. I mean, it's an impressive list of Microsoft, Juniper, Amex, and a number of others. Have you seen them utilizing these concepts in a different yet effective ways? Or were you involved in utilizing these concepts effectively in those organizations?
I'm going to probably regret saying this, Matt, but I'm going to give huge praise to my biggest competitor today, and that's Microsoft. And it is a culture that certainly in the early 2000s was getting a lot of negative fingers pointed at it for a rough and tumble culture, and something that culture that necessarily didn't practice a lot of these things, at least on the surface. But I will tell you is there was a core leadership group within that company that was incredibly engaged on emotional and social intelligence and trying to bring change in the company. And I will tell you is that when I had all the industry analysts reaching out to me after I'd left Microsoft, when Steve Ballmer had announced that he was going to step down, as to who was the inside bet that was going to become the next CEO. And this is when they were looking at the CEO of Ford and a bunch of other outside individuals. I said, there's only one person that's actually eventually going to become the CEO of this company. It's just obvious for anybody who's on the inside, and that's Satya. And I'd gotten to know Satya over the years in the company. And the thing that Satya brought to the table that no other leader had or was even close to was incredible experience around cloud and technology and what was happening in the industry. He had a high IQ, no question about it, but this incredible empathy that he could bring to the table. And that empathetic leadership was just so outstanding. And you've now seen it go through the process of him getting hired into the CEO and now how he has transformed that company. But Satya, Chris Capossela, who is his chief marketing officer, Scott Guthrie, who heads the Azure business. There's a reason why this company is just firing on all cylinders right now. And it is just this incredible leadership that is very socially and emotionally engaged. And for me to heap that type of effusive praise on a bitter competitor that I have in the marketplace right now seems like a hard thing to do, but it really is reflective of some of those leadership experiences that I've had from the past and that I can see continuing to go forward in great companies and how it's built great companies.
So I'm curious if either of you have any other people you'd like to credit or recognize that had a profound, even if it was a brief, impact on you that really changed the course of what you're doing.
I'll give you the one name, which is Kevin Johnson, who's now the CEO of Starbucks.
And he'd be one of mine too.
Yeah, he's the reason I came to Juniper when that was going on. There's very few people that I would willingly follow just about anywhere. And he is definitely one of those leaders. And it is for this reason.
From an EI standpoint, what are his traits or strengths that make you want to follow him anywhere, or be willing to anyway?
Yeah, he's one of my favorites I've ever worked with. I'd say the trust, the relationship building, you just feel super warm and you feel like it's personal and you don't have these divided lines. And I felt that pretty early on working with him. I was the head of talent for him at Juniper, but followed by the fact that I'm a little bit nuts. And so I went into him the first couple of times to test the waters. I'm like, I have this crazy idea. And within 5 minutes, people were like, well, where's your 40-page deck? And I had like 3 Post-it notes and some scratchy stuff like I always do. And I'm like, yeah, it's not how I work. And he loved my Post-it notes and he grabbed them. And in 5 minutes, he goes, you sound passionate, do it. So I don't know where it was just all of the above, like trust immediately, close connection. Of course, that made me want to be even more right and make him proud and make him go look good. And he wasn't digging through decks. He was just a different CEO than I'd ever seen in my life, of autonomy and trust and following passion. So that would be mine. I don't know what Brad would say.
Yeah, well, I'd rather than say it, put in an example. A set of Black customers were kicked out of a Starbucks. I think you remember that a couple of years ago. And Kevin had gone on CNBC and had a very emotional response. And I had texted him right after coming off of that and saying, hey, you know what, feel for you, buddy. That is a very hard situation to go through. And I could really see the emotional impact. 30 seconds later, he'd called me and we were talking through the conversation of what he was feeling and how he was going through it. for somebody to take the moment out and have that conversation with me, but more importantly is how deeply personally it impacted him from an emotional standpoint. It's just a perfect example of the type of individual he is, not just as a professional, but as a personal human being, and what it means to him. And it's just the example. It's somebody that's a CEO of one of the largest consumer companies in the world is going to drop at a moment's notice to talk to somebody and a friend about an emotional experience that he's going through in that moment is just a reflection of the type of leader he is.
And the loyalty he brings, I became a Twitter troll that night because I know how honest that was for him. I remember where I watched it, what I did. And that night there were a few like, oh, those are fake tears. And I was on there like, that is not, I used to work for, and it just goes to show you the full circle, right? Is like being proud of someone you work for and knowing that wasn't BS. And so it just shows you who he is. And we both have totally different stories with him, but they're very similar. Why?